The views and opinions expressed by individuals on the following program do not necessarily reflect those of the network, Guys Guy Radio, and its platforms.
It's Guys Guy Radio. Here's your host, Robert Manni.
Welcome to Guys Guys Radio. This is your host, Robert Manni, welcoming you to the show where men and women can be at their best and everyone wins. Guys Guys Radio. We're here to inform you, inspire you, empower you, and get you to think, feel, and who knows, maybe even act by virtue of the journeys, stories, experiences, and insights of the guests I bring you each and every week to the show. And this week, once again, is no exception. We've got a great show, and we're going to talk about some serious stuff. As you know, the last couple of weeks, we've talked about addiction, becoming a widow, and this week we're going to talk about grief. That's right. On Guys Guys Radio, we really want to tackle some of the more serious subjects. We do a lot of fun things. We've done, I think, 570 shows, and we've got a lot more to go. And we're covering the waterfront in terms of dating, relationships, wellness, spirituality, sports, New York Times bestsellers, all kinds of stuff. And it's all fun stuff. It's all good stuff. It's all things we can learn and really use each and every day if we so choose to. But today we're going to talk about grief because I want to take on some subjects that are really some of the things that we all deal with at some time or another. I mean, everybody knows somebody who has some type of addiction. Everybody knows somebody who's lost a spouse. And everybody knows somebody who's dealt with grief. And most of us have dealt with our own personal grief, losing a loved one at one time or another. Now, today, my special guest, he has really gone through a lot of grief. He and his wife, they lost their two teenage children. They were killed in a car crash while the family was on their way to look at a new home they were looking at in Joshua Tree, California, and they got T-boned, and the children passed. And it's just an unbelievable story, and the strength that these two folks have is just incredible, what they've been able to do to help people, to share their story, to give tips about where you go to join a group if you've had something horrible like this happen, what you can do for each step of the way, the logistics, and how you can not lose yourself and actually find yourself and grow from this experience. It's an amazing, heroic story. My special guest is Colin Campbell. He's written a book about his experience. It's called Finding the Words, Working Through Profound Loss with Hope and Purpose. He's a writer, director for theater and film, and he and his wife really worked closely to kind of save their own lives, if you will, to find meaning and deal with the grief they experienced from losing their two teenage children who were very, very close to them, as you can imagine. And it's just unbelievable, unfathomable what happens if parents not only lose one child, but two. And the great thing is the couple is still together. We're going to talk to Colin Campbell today about this experience, about his books, and he also has a one-man show about this experience, about grief, that's going to take off and launch on Broadway and also in Southern California and Los Angeles. And he's a real life hero, and he's a guy's guy, and he's a lot more than that. He's a real man's man in every sense of the word. And I'm so honored that he's here on the show and is going to share with us everything he experienced and everything he learned, so that we'll look at some of our own personal troubles and they'll be trivialized by something like this type of grief. And also, maybe we'll be in a better position to handle this type of experience or something like that when we lose a loved one, a friend, a family member, whether they're older or younger, and God forbid losing a child, which is unfathomable to me. But it happens, and it happens all the time, and a lot of people don't know what to do. They don't know where to turn. And thankfully, Colin and his wife have put together a lot of instruction in terms of how to deal with this, how to cope, how to not just fall by the wayside, and how to grow from the experience and how to share. Because a lot of what Colin talks about is finding the words. It's all about people really don't know how to grieve, and they don't know how to talk about it, and everybody kind of distances themselves from you when things happen like this, because a lot of times they're just uncomfortable and they don't want it to rub off on them in any way. It's just a subconscious thing. I know from going through my own health challenges about almost a decade ago now, that when I told people what was going on, they were like, I could see them kind of backing away thinking, oh, well, nice knowing you. But you know what? Hey, I'm here. But it's just understandable. In human nature, people get afraid and they back away and they don't want to have to deal with some of this stuff. And like I said, on Guys Radio, we want to bring you some of the challenging aspects of life so we can all be the best people we can be. So when men and women can be at their best, everyone wins. So Guys Radio, let's get into my conversation with Colin Campbell right away.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
It's Guys Guy Radio.
Okay, Guys Radio, time to bring on our special guest for the week. Let me tell you a little bit about my special guest and his background. You know, loss and grief are universal experiences, but too often shrouded in isolation and discomfort. In his new book, my guest, Colin Campbell, writes, Finding the Words, Working Through Profound Loss with Hope and Purpose. And it offers an account of his journey through profound loss and grief while providing guidance and practical tools for others going through similar experiences. Colin is a writer, director for theater and film. He teaches screenwriting at Chapman University and theater at California State Polytech. His highly anticipated solo performance show is coming out, one-man show, and it's going to be performed in Los Angeles and New York City this year. Finding the Words, Working Through Profound Loss with Hope and Purpose. The new book just came out, and I think you'll really learn a lot if you have any friends or if you go through any experiences like Colin and his wife have gone through. So let's just start at the very beginning and welcome onto Guys Radio, Colin Campbell. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here.
Well, it's my pleasure, and really the honor goes to you because you are doing some heroic work out there. For the benefit of our audience, what basically happened with Colin, and I'll let him flesh it out, but he and his wife were visiting a new home that they were planning on buying out in California, and they, with their two teenage kids, and they got T-boned, and it was a crash, and both children passed. And since then, Colin has put together a book. He's put together a one-man show. He's really gone out there to help people deal with the grieving process because it's something that most people don't know what to do. So let me start at the very beginning, Colin. Why did you feel the need to speak up and go public about this experience? It's a brave decision, and I'm sure you're helping a lot of people. But what was the trigger to cause you to say, we want to put this out there?
Yeah. Well, the very first trigger was very shortly after the crash. Just a few days after the crash, I began writing what I thought of as a one-man show. And it was me just trying to process what was happening to me. It was so hard to understand, to accept the reality of it. And coming from the theater, it just made sense, I guess, to me I'm gonna express myself in a theatrical form. And so I started writing this one person show, really just to help me exercise my feelings and then literally to understand, to process it. And then I started showing some people the script, and people really responded like, wow, you're saying things that are interesting that I've never heard before about somebody processing grief. And then I was about to perform it for the first time, March 2020, and that's when the pandemic happened and all the theaters shut down. And so my wife and I, Gail, we were alone like everybody else in isolation, and I still had that need to process. I needed to still express out to somebody, to the universe, what was happening to me so I could understand it. And I noticed in a lot of grief groups, because we joined a bunch of different grief groups, a lot of people in those circles talked very bitterly about how they felt abandoned by their loved ones in loss. They felt like people stepped away from them, didn't reach out, and it was so hurtful. And Gail and I, maybe because we're from a theater background, or we're we're used to expressing ourselves. I'm not sure, but we found ways to keep our community close, and I thought those were worth sharing.
Okay. Do you want to spend a little time? You want to talk about your children? I want to keep this conversation, and I know obviously they meant the world to you, and I'm sure in your heart they're there, and maybe beyond that. So talk to us about your kids and what happened.
Yeah. So my daughter's Ruby. She was 17 years old when she was killed, and my son Hart was 14 when he was killed, and they were extraordinary children. I said at the second night of Shiva, I can go into what Shiva means, but the second night of mourning after the funeral, and I said to the crowd of friends, I said, everybody thinks their kids are the greatest, but actually mine were. Mine were the greatest kids. And I really felt that way when they were alive. I was so proud and honored to be their dad. And that was really how I thought of myself. First and foremost, I was Ruby and Hart's dad. And then I was Gail's husband. And then I was a theater artist. And then I was a professor and a brother and a son, etc. But really the central core of my identity was I was Ruby and Hart's dad. And there were so many special things about them, but one of them was they're teenagers and they still loved me and Gail and loved hanging out with us. But for some reason, they never really entered that teenage phase of rejecting us.
I hate you, Dad, right? Didn't get into that, right?
Never got that. Never, ever got that. Not once. They always were down with hanging out with us and going on adventures together. And one of our favorite adventures was to come out here to the desert, to Joshua Tree. And that's why we were looking at buying a house out here, a vacation home, because we loved it so much. We came out here so often. It's about 2.5 hours east of Los Angeles. So it's like a manageable vacation. And we love scrambling up these rocks. For those of you who don't know, Joshua Tree National Park is quite extraordinary and special. It's the size of Rhode Island. It's in a massive national park. And there are these amazing rock formations that are very climbable. It's very inviting to people. Just scramble up these rocks, and you have amazing views of the desert. It's a very, very special place.
Now, you mentioned, there's a quote I want to read back to you. By taking grieving out of the public sphere and turning it into a private illness, we have isolated people in mourning and stripped them of the rituals and community support they need to process their loss. As a society, we've become uncomfortable talking about death. As a result, grief has become more mysterious and frightening. I think that's brilliant. Talk to us about that, because that was really part of the fuel that's driven you to create the work you've done now.
Yeah, thank you. Well, just pick up on the very last idea, the idea that grief is so mysterious. I encountered that a lot in the early days of grief. A lot of grief books and grief therapists, they talk about how everybody grieves in their own way. And I understood where that was coming from. The idea is just to validate, whatever's happening with you and your grief, don't judge yourself. You're not doing it wrong. And that's all very important and valuable. But I wanted a little more guidance. I wanted a little more structure, because the idea that we all grieve in our own way, in a way, left me without any tools. Because it's kind of saying you're on your own. Good luck to you. And I felt like that wasn't really true. Because when I talked to other grieving people, there was a real commonality in our struggles and our issues. And one of the central issues for many of us in grief is that feeling of isolation. And it's natural. It makes sense. People are scared to upset you further. So they don't want to reach out and remind you of your loss, right? They don't want to say, oh, I'm so sorry that your children were killed, in case I wasn't thinking about them at that moment. But the reality is I never forget that Ruby and Hart are killed, and you can't really trigger me because, as I say, I'm already triggered. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but I love talking about my grief and my children, and I also love crying. My relationship to tears and pain has just become radically different because I realize there's no escaping it. And so you have to, in some way, maybe make friends with pain is not the right way, but learn to live alongside it. Learn to find ways to experience joy along with the pain.
What were some of the words or actions that gave you some comfort? Because as you say, most people don't know how to handle it. There's no rule book. They don't know what to say. I notice when when I've been to funerals and had family members have passed, and every situation is different, but there are some commonalities. And one commonality I found is people don't know what to do.
Right. Right.
But what were some of the things that you got? Back to my question. I'm sorry. What were some of the words or actions that gave you some comfort? Some of the good things you got?
Some of the most wonderful things were people expressing their love and their grief at the death of Ruby and Hart. Those were some of the most wonderful things to receive. So it was very early on, and one of Hart's friends, he sent us an email. So we got many, many emails and phone calls. And everybody was writing, "There are no words. There are no words. Your loss is so immense. I can't even begin to imagine. There are no words." And then we love you, and that's it. And that's wonderful. I love hearing that. But what I really loved hearing was how much they felt the loss of Ruby and Hart. And this young friend of Hart's, they wrote this amazing email of just saying, "I loved Hart. He was the world to me." And then he described this specific memory that he had of Hart, this moment they shared, and how his life will be forever changed because of Hart. And he'll think about Hart and love Hart for the rest of his life. And it's like, oh my God, that's the most amazing thing to share. And to be honest, we had many of our adult friends also did that as well. They also opened up and shared. But it was remarkable how often the children were comfortable just simply expressing their love for Ruby and Hart, and how welcome that was, and how many adults were scared to do that.
Mm-hmm. Did you find, Colin, and I don't know what your personal situation is, but for whether either religious or spiritual beliefs, and your wife's, I know she's Jewish and you're Christian, I believe, by what you grew up as or whatever. I don't know what you are now.
No, actually, my parents were raised as Christians, Protestants, and they rebelled in the 60s against their parents, and they're atheists. Okay. And so they raised their 3 children. I'm the youngest of 3 as atheists. Okay. And I have to say, I really enjoy being an atheist my whole life. I've really enjoyed it. But when it came to grieving Ruby and Hart, I had no cultural traditions. And I embraced the traditions of Judaism because my wife is Jewish. So we raised Ruby and Hart as Jews. They got bar and bat mitzvah. We were active members of our temple. Okay. And I loved being a part. I love being a part of Ikar, that's the name of our temple. It's a particularly warm and embracing and social justice oriented temple in Los Angeles. It's quite powerful organization and a quite powerful community, and they rallied to us in a way that I had never imagined was possible, and the way that they supported us in our grief. And then specifically, I learned so much from the Jewish traditions about what it means to grieve and how to grieve, literally how to grieve. It was a extraordinary eye-opener.
Mm-hmm. As an atheist, quote unquote atheist, which is not really, there's no real definition for that because there's so many variations. Yeah. And I don't know if you have spirituality as part of your journey, if you will, but how did your personal beliefs, how were they impacted by what happened? Your wife is Jewish, so there are traditions there, and it's I'm Christian, a lot faster in the Jewish tradition. To the process goes faster in terms of getting things done there, the logistics. Yes. And I know from a big Italian family, everybody cries and eats, and the communication is like. The first couple of times you go to one of these things, it's like, that's what happens. So what happened with you personally in terms of your own beliefs and how you responded to the situation? And did those beliefs change at all? I know you mentioned that you got comfort from the Jewish traditions, but for yourself, your own personal beliefs, were they challenged at all by this?
Well, I had a deeply held personal belief that everything was going to work out in the end. I really believed that everything was going to get better and better. And whatever challenges I faced, I was going to surmount them and be improved by them. And I really believed that narrative. And I just sort of felt special. In a way, I think that we all kind of feel special, right? Until we suffer a terrible loss, it feels like life is great. And that was very hard for me. To realize that I wasn't safe, I wasn't protected from terrible, terrible loss, and and the unimaginable can happen to anybody. So that was a rough awakening. And then in terms of spirituality, I feel like I did become a little more spiritual in the sense that once Ruby and Hart were killed, it was such a deep, traumatic explosion to my own identity. It was so devastating that in a way it revealed to me. I knew that I loved Ruby and Hart deeply. I knew that already. I didn't need to be reminded, but the depths of it were kind of shocking. And in a way, it sort of tore apart the idea that we're all individuals. Mm-hmm. Because if I could be rocked this hard by somebody else's death, anybody else's death, it kind of means we're interconnected in a deeper way than I realized. And that part of me is really them. They shaped me, made me, they're in me.
Well, I got to tell you, for an atheist, that's a very spiritual take on it. So congratulations. So my special guest on Guys Radio, Colin Campbell, finding the words, working through profound loss with hope and purpose. Let's move on to talk about the 5 stages of grief. I know it's not a happy subject, but typically they're denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. You have a list of key action steps in the book: saying yes, grief groups, trying new things, getting out of bed. It seems like your way of managing the grief process. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I do want to say that there's a lot of misunderstanding about the stages of grief. As there's a widespread notion that one goes from specific distinct stages one after another, and then they arrive at acceptance in the end. And that was never the author's intention. Names immediately escape me, but David Kessler, in conjunction with one of the most famous people in grief, and the name's gone from my mind. I'm so embarrassed, but I read her work, and they never intended it that way. The word stages, I think, confuses people and makes them think that you go from one to the next, and you eventually traverse in a linear way. And what they were really trying to do was talk about just states of mind that one encounters as one moves through grief, and you encounter them all often at the same time, in different orders, different moments of the day. And so to my mind, there aren't really stages of grief in the sense that people think of. It's really, I think of them as challenges. We go through challenges. So in a given day, I might feel rage, and then denial, and then guilt, all at once. They're all interconnected. And that can maybe be confusing to people who imagine they're on some very linear path. That's not how grief works.
And that's not how your book works also, which I say is a good thing, because it's a crash course in grief, but you don't have to go through chapter 1 to 10 linearly. You can jump around. And some of the titles are fear, community, ritual, pain, denial, holidays, guilt, rage, despair. It's a book. It's a workbook as well as a book with, very brilliant text in it. So what were the toughest aspects of the buckets, if you will, of grief for you? There's the guilt, there's anger, depression. Which did you struggle with, and what should your wife struggle with the most? And were they the same?
Yeah. I think Gail and I, in many ways, we were on a very parallel track through grief. There were days when we were just taking a walk and find we were both thinking the same exact thought, whatever it was, either a specific memory of Ruby and Hart, or a specific reaction to what's happening to us, or thoughts about guilt, denial, whatever it is. We were on very similar tracks. But then on days when we weren't, that was okay too. There might be a day where Gail felt particularly full of despair. And despair, I think, is the most frightening place to be. And it helped that I wasn't in despair in that moment. It helped that we were not exactly in the same place. We could pull each other out. But to answer your question, the hardest, I think, is despair, because it makes you feel hopeless, and it makes you feel like things will never get better. It'll never change. I'll be in despair forever, because why would I ever stop being in despair? Ruby and Hart aren't going to come back, and I'm in despair because they're gone. That's not going to change, so my despair is not going to change. And the reality is that it does, that you will come out of despair. You have to trust in that. And also, I think, take action. And that was really what I discovered. If I could somehow take an action, almost any action, honestly, it helped me move through grief. Instead of just lying in bed and just feeling like, and grief is just this amorphous blob just crushing me. If I could just say, you know what, I'm gonna do something in honor of Ruby and Hart. I'm gonna take a walk in honor of Ruby and Hart. I'm gonna write a letter. I'm gonna journal. I'm gonna call a friend and go for a walk. Anything, any kind of action that I can take to show initiative helped me so immensely. And that's why my books are, each chapter has a whole list of actions people can take, just offering suggestions to people, things that helped me.
Did you, a lot of times when parents lose a child, in your case too, double, my gosh, they have issues. The marriage is challenged. You guys seem to have come through it stronger than ever, from what I could take from the book, but I'm sure there were challenging times there. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. First, I want to address, I think, another misconception about grief. I think there are a lot of myths about grief, and you're touching on it. There's a lot of, several people came up and told me, a lot of times marriages fall apart and you get divorced after the death of a child. And statistically, it's not actually true.
Okay.
Compassionate Friends is this national organization, and it's done 2 very thorough studies of grieving parents. And it found that the rate of divorce after the death of a child is actually lower than the national average. And furthermore, when they surveyed those parents who did get divorced, only about a quarter of them said it was directly related to the death of our child. So that kind of makes sense, because sometimes couples can be falling apart, and then coincidentally their child dies. Somebody, kills their child in a drunk driving crash. So it's not a reflection of why their marriage is falling apart in the first place. And oftentimes marriages are brought together closer because it's such a crucible, and you're sharing this terrible, terrible pain. And as I say in my one-person show, how could we stand to lose each other after we just lost Ruby and Hart? We're already so alone. And that was very true for Gail and I. We really clung to each other, and we are closer.
How are there divergent feelings and perspectives that you and Gail have and have had throughout this experience?
I don't think wildly divergent, but we do know some couples who do move through grief very differently, and yet still have a very strong marriage. We know a very close couple that we're very close with, and she's more private and he's more public, and so he has a need to share more, and she has a need to be less forthcoming to the larger population, just to her friends, and they navigate just fine. They're just doing it a little differently. I don't think anything. I'm trying to think of something.
It's okay.
Well, I can say that I'm doing a solo show, and I wrote a book about grief, and my wife Gail wrote a kids book. She wrote a young adult, a middle grade book, and it's a delightful comedy. It's a sweet, but it honors Ruby and Hart. So it's called the Big Dreams of Small Creatures. And so we were both writing books together, and mine was all about grief and darkness and suffering, and hers was this delightful, delightful novel.
How did you learn about, and are there good resources there for people experiencing grief in terms of groups that they can go to and people who have had similar experiences? And how was process?
Yeah, thanks for asking about that, because that's such an important resource. So the Compassionate Friends is a national organization, so it has meetings all over the country. So there's probably a local one near to wherever you, the mourner, is. And therefore, parents, grandparents, and siblings who've lost someone. And you can have lost someone a week ago or 30 years ago. And you're welcome to join this community and share. And that's a very powerful experience, to be in that room with people in very different places in their journey through grief. It can be very helpful. And I found it to be very helpful, for sure. And nobody wants to go to a grief group, by the way. It's not like, hooray, I get to go to a grief group.
Right.
There's a natural reticence. You don't want to be in a room. You think you don't want to be in a room full of other people's pain, right? You have your own pain. It's overwhelming. I can't take more people's pain. But actually, being in community is so valuable. It's so helpful. And then another grief group that we joined is called Our House. And that's specifically to Los Angeles. I wish it were national because it has an amazing model, which is that group, they try and team you up with about 10 other people who are suffering very similar loss. So for us, for our group, it was losing an adult child suddenly within the last 6 to 10 months. And then you sign up for a 2-year commitment and you agree, I'm going to come here twice a month for 2 years. And we're all going to journey together on this path. And I remember when Gail and I were driving there for the first meeting, we're like, there's no way we're going for 2 years. we can't even commit to something 2 hours from now. No way. We're going to go and we're going to leave. We don't owe them anything. and then we stayed the whole time. And we're still in contact with these people. It was so powerful.
Let me ask this, and forgive me, I want to ask this the right way. Has this experience in some ways made you a better person? I know it's been, the worst possible thing that can happen. Yeah. It sounds like you're building off of it in a very constructive way. And I applaud you as a human being of being able to do this. And now you're helping other people. Tell us about your personal journey to getting through this. It seems like what you've been saying is that, laying in bed is not going to do it. You got to get out and do stuff. And you're doing stuff using the creative gifts that you have, both you and your wife, in terms of putting content out there that can actually help people and entertain them at the same time, so people can be more comfortable, if you will, quote unquote, dealing with this type of real life situation that frequently occurs.
Yeah. It's interesting. I talk in the book about how at first I was really repulsed by the idea of, as you said, somehow improving, getting better. Like the idea that anything good could possibly have come from Ruby and Hart's deaths was just repulsive to me. I was like, no, I'm not improved in any way. I won't have it. But the reality is that I am changed and I have grown. I have a deeper compassion for other people in pain simply because I understand pain in a new way. I understand grief and loss and pain. And I can't help but empathize with other people who are also suffering because I get it in a way that I never did before. So I am improved. There is that a phrase, post-traumatic growth. I've encountered a number of times because I do a lot of reading about grief. I've read a lot of grief books. And like I said, at first I didn't like the idea, post-traumatic growth. But it's true. It is a reality. If you allow yourself to, I think maybe not everybody grows after trauma, but if you're able to process it, I think you do grow. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Colin, what can friends do when dealing with a situation like this to be a good friend? I mean, we all have things that happen. Like I went to the hospital a couple of times and I didn't hear from my friends or even a lot of family members. And that was surprising in a way, but not surprising in another way, because I figured that's just the way it is. Like, don't think too much of yourself. This is just people are busy and this and that. What advice would you give to friends when people have things happen to them?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I love it. And my answer is be present and reach out and offer to go for walks, offer specific things. I think sometimes people just say, I'll do anything for you, whatever you want. And that doesn't really lead to anything, because then it puts a burden on me to think of, well, what do I want? I don't know what, but if you specifically suggest, hey, Colin, I'm available next week every day at 10 a.m. to go for a walk. I'd love to spend time with you. And that way, if I don't feel like going for a walk, then I just say no. But if I do, I know someone's there for me. And then oftentimes people who are suffering an acute grief, acute loss, they do have a period where they cocoon. They don't want to talk to other people. And then I think my journey was gradually realizing I needed to talk to people, and it really helped me. And I wanted to get out of bed and go out into the world. But I think people confuse that initial period of like, I'm in my own head, to mean that's how they're always going to be. And so if they reach out to you early on and you say, no, I don't want to go for a walk, they think, oh, Colin never wants to go for a walk. I'll never reach out again. I don't want to bother him. And then 2 weeks later, I'm like, wait, where's everybody? Right. And so keep reaching out.
I have to applaud you. My special guest, Colin Campbell, who's written this beautiful book, Finding the Words, Working Through Profound Loss with Hope and Purpose. And one of the things we want to do here on Guys Radio, I want to bring all different types of guests with all different types of information to help people. And sometimes we have to get real. And Colin's doing it the right way, and he's really helping people. And I want to also applaud you as a man, because the name of the show is Guys Radio. And often men don't, quote unquote, pay attention. And you are now, in my opinion, very present and very in touch with who you are, what you are, and how you feel about things. And I think you're a beacon for other men out there. Oh. Talk to us about, as a man, what this process has taught you about being a man, and what you see is not happening out there, and what needs to happen out there for guys to really step up.
Yeah. That's a great question. I think I've got a couple things to say about that. One, I think there's another misconception about handling grief as a man, which is like, I'll handle it, right? Something terrible happened to me, I'll handle it, which means I'll bottle it up.
Exactly.
I won't talk about it to other people. I won't share my pain, because that's not manly. So I'll just bottle it up and that's really tough. I'm really tough because I can just bottle up whatever terrible things happened to me, not ever talk about it again. But actually, that's not as manly as it is to experience the pain, to allow yourself to experience the pain, and then to experience that pain in public, to share it with people that you love. Because in a way, that's a scarier, much, much more brave thing to do, but also much healthier thing to do, because it allows you to process it. So if you bottle up all these terrible feelings, they come out in another way. So you turn to alcohol to numb it, right? Or drugs to numb it, or, unsafe sex, or unsafe activities, right? You turn to death-defying activities, because you have unprocessed pain, you have unprocessed grief. And I think what I've learned is the braver, stronger, and so much more helpful thing to do is to look at that pain square in the eyes, take it in, and then live alongside it. And the other thing I found as a man grieving is that I didn't have as many resources as Gail did. I didn't have as many guy friends as she had girlfriends. So right away, she's off, having these healthy, helpful conversations with all of her female friends. And I was like, I've been neglecting my guy friends. I just was kind of like having a good time hanging out with my kids and my wife. And I'm just not that good at being a friend. I realized that. Mm-hmm. And so I realized I had to change. I had to get my act together. And I had this sort of epiphany that I always wanted to say no. Someone would reach out, hey, Colin, do you want to go for a walk? No, I don't. And then I realized that was all out of fear. And so it was hard to make decisions in early grief. So I just said yes to everything. Literally anyone who said something to me, I would just say yes to them, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. Even if I didn't want to do it, even if it sounded terrible, I just said yes because it was helpful to me, because it was too hard to make decisions. And that in a way helped me connect with guy friends and talk about grief.
Okay. In a nutshell, we want people to buy the book. It's terrific. What would be like the top 3 things you would want people who are experiencing something similar to this to do, to know about, to help them in carrying forward? Take away from the book.
I think one of the biggest takeaways is if you can help it, don't grieve alone. Find a community, find ways of accessing your community, find ways of sharing your pain. And then don't be afraid of the pain. That's what was a big lesson for me. Pain comes in waves. And so it can feel terrifying. If I start down that path and I start weeping, I'll never stop. But it's not true. You do stop. And And you need to do this in order to process your pain. And what's my third thing? Let me think about it.
Well, there's many, I know.
Two.
I'm forgetting.
Yeah, there's lots. But yes, I'm trying to.
Okay.
Had another idea, but that's okay.
It'll come. Let me ask you about something you mentioned, which I was not aware of. You mentioned something about adopting two foster kids who are teens, which is incredibly noble of you and your wife.
Well, we love being parents, and it's a big part of our identity, and we thought, well, let's lean into the pain even more, to be honest, because it doesn't take away the pain. It's not like we're not replacing Ruby and Hart. We're building a whole new life that hopefully also includes the memories and thoughts of Ruby and Hart with them. And so we're on a path to build a new family with two amazing children who've suffered a lot of loss and grief of their own, and a lot of trauma. And so we have that in common. And it's not easy. It's not emotionally easy. It's not like a fix at all. In a way, it's inviting more pain, but we're more alive, I think, as a result.
With the two children now, are they related to each other?
Yes, they're siblings.
Okay, and something happened to their folks, or what? You don't have to get into the details.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's just that not able to be raised by their parents.
Okay. Now you've got your show, your one-man show. Where is it playing now?
Yes, thank you for that. It's playing in New York City, Theater Row. It opens March 29th and runs to April 16th. And please come. We've got one show's already sold out, but the other 12 shows have lots of tickets available. So get your tickets now.
Mm-hmm. Have you received a lot of feedback from other folks who are going through similar situations saying, you know what, there hasn't been a resource for something like this? Thank you.
I have. It's been extraordinarily empowering, and I'm deeply grateful when I get these feedbacks from people who said, I've read dozens of grief books and nothing spoke to me like your book speaks to me. And I think part of it is also, I wrote it very early on in grief. Some of my issues with some of the grief books I read where they lost somebody 10 years ago. And I feel like it felt like they were painting it too rosy a picture. It's hard. It's hard to grieve. And so I think my book does honor the challenges, the struggles. Yeah.
You're doing terrific work. What is next for you and your wife, Gail?
Well, by my show, it's darkly comedic. People I imagine would be terrified of going to see a one-man show about grief. It sounds.
Are there any laughs in it, Colin?
There are a lot of laughs. Okay. People are surprised at how much I can almost guarantee that you will laugh in my show, and you will most likely cry. But I can almost guarantee the laughs will come. It's a very funny show, but very real, very raw and real. And that's been getting a lot of powerful feedback as well. And then we're building a family. That's really what's next for us.
Last question for you. Do you, and this is just from my own, this is where I'm curious, we're having a conversation. Do you feel what's the connection you feel with your children who are gone? Do you feel that you feel their vibration, you feel their presence, or they're just gone? And their memories in your heart. What's your own personal view of all of that, and your wife?
Yeah.
If you don't mind my asking. If it's too personal, I understand.
No, nothing's too personal. Not for me. What do you see my show? You'll see. It gets very personal. It's murky for me. Occasionally I'll speak to them as if they can hear me, and then other times I am just struck by the fact that they're gone forever and I'll never see them again. So that's, I guess, sort of a spiritual side to me, the idea that maybe they can hear me and they're cheering me on. I think about that a lot. I think of them cheering me on. They loved me very deeply. They were very cool kids. Ruby, in fact, suggested to us just a year or two before she was killed that we should foster adopt. It was her idea, which is so extraordinary, right? As a teenage girl, to be like, we should foster adopt kids. But so I imagine that they're cheering us on. They're rooting for us in life.
I think so. And I'm sure they love you. You do just what you've done with your experiences is amazing, and God bless you, and keep doing. And I know you're an atheist, but I'll just say it anyhow.
I'll take it.
Just amazing work, you and your wife. So congratulations to both of you for contributing and for handling your experience with the authenticity, with the honesty, and the generosity that you've shown. So tell everybody, Colin, we know about the show. Where can they find your book? Do you have a website, etc.?
I do. So the website for the book is colincampbellauthor.com. And you can buy the book anywhere. So anywhere they sell books, my book is available. And then my show, again, is griefaonemanshow.com for info and tickets. And it's in Theater Row in New York City from March 29th to April 16th.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on the great work you're doing. And again, I applaud you for your courage, your authenticity, and you being not only a guy's guy, but a real man. Thank you, Colin Campbell, for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
It's Guys Guy Radio.
Okay, that was a real conversation with a real-life hero, Colin Campbell, who's written the book about he and his wife's grief at losing their two teenage children in a car crash a few years ago, and from that, how he climbed out of the funk that you can understand he would be experiencing and put together this wonderful book, Finding the Words, Working Through Profound Loss with Hope and Purpose. He teaches screenwriting in Southern California at Chapman University, and he is now launching his one-man show in New York on Broadway, Theater Row actually, and also in Los Angeles, and we wish him all the best because, wow, going through this experience and pulling himself up by the bootstraps to really cope, maintain his marriage and make it even stronger, hopefully, and also deal with all of the grief that comes along with losing the two most special people, obviously, in your life, your children. And what a hero, what a man. I'm just so pleased and honored that he was with us on the show today because, you know, again, on Guys Radio, we want to bring all types of thought leaders on the show to teach us. And I'm getting the same education you guys are out there for a lot of these subjects because I've lost loved ones. I have not lost my child, fortunately, and I can't imagine having the strength that Colin and his wife had to go through this experience and come out the other end and really be of service to everybody by writing this book and joining grief groups and being available to help people who've had to deal with this type of traumatic experience. So great job, Colin. And I believe his wife's name is Gail. I didn't get a chance to meet her, but wow, real true life heroes. And thankfully there's people like that who are so giving and so strong. And what else did we learn there? I think we learned about the whole process itself is, you know, people are afraid to talk about it. People don't know what to say. And Colin has taught us that we really want to have conversations. We really, really want to spend time with our friends and family. We don't want people to back away. We want to accept invitations. We want to continue having open communications with our group, our friends and our family, because it's so important, and you can't just ignore and block out these type of situations that happen in life. They happen to all of us in some form or fashion, not exactly like this, but we all lose people. We all grieve. We all lose people to sickness and old age and ill health, and sometimes it's a big surprise, and other times it isn't. And regardless of the case, it's painful, and we need to learn how to converse with each other and be supportive instead of shying away and just saying, oh, wow, I hope that doesn't wipe off on me, because that's what so many people do, whether it's subconsciously or not, but they're afraid. And so we have to be strong for them and engage. So Guys Radio, we're here every Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Pacific time on KCAA Radio here in Southern California. The podcast, YouTube, and Rumble post worldwide every Thursday. And we're on UK Health Radio all weekend long, 4 times, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So I'm super appreciative for you being along for the ride. And thank you to all of my 750 plus guests that I've interviewed, all these thought leaders that I've talked to over the past couple of years. They've been fantastic. Also, my wonderful producer, Chris, thank you so much for all your wonderful work. And also Ryan, my strategy lead, who really keeps me and the brand on beam. And most of all, I want to thank all of our listeners and viewers out there as we continue to grow and increase platforms and just the brand just growing organically. And it's so much fun. And I'm really happy and very proud to be able to share information that's going to hopefully help people. And you know what? It's up to you. You can vibe with something or not. That's your choice. I'm going to bring you the guests. You determine if that's right for you. That's what we do here. And we're going to keep doing it for you each and every week. So I hope to see you and hear you all next week at this time. And until then, like I always like to say, guys, finish first.